All right, here's another quick video from Druthers. Last time I went through the back of the paper. This is the March edition of Druthers, issue number 28, March 2023. Druthers, Truth, Love, Freedom. If I had my druthers, we would all know the truth. I don't know why I said it like that, but that's what's on the front here. Fantastic. If you haven't seen this publication before, I highly encourage you to get it. Like I said before, it's available outside of Canada now. It's available in the US and internationally as far as I know. So it's not exclusive to Canada. One really cool thing with this, and props to Shawn James and his team, they put this thing out for free, right? You might be asking, well, where do they get the money to print it, manufacture it, and all that stuff? They get that entirely from donations, as far as I know. So the people of this great land are the ones that are funding it. The only thing you have to pay for is the shipping. So what makes that really cool, such a great idea, is have the people that are interested only pay for the shipping because it's such a good cause. But this also allows us to pay for the shipping for our entire street if we want, or the entire block, or the entire neighborhood. And some people are doing that, and I find that's just so inspiring. I have actually gone around here and delivered some. I had some extras last year, I think it was, and I went and just delivered them here. We had gotten a box just to kind of see what would come of it, and we did deliver it to about 50 households or so. I'd be really curious. I'll never know what implication, what effect that had on the community. But I can only wonder, if it touched even just one person, right? If someone, just one person, one family was like, "Oh, this is awesome. I don't know who put this in my mailbox, but I'm so happy about this," and then they signed up, it was all worth it. It was all worth it because their lives are better for it now, just like our lives became better when we found out about this newspaper. Today I wanted to go over a section in here that's called Good News Tidbits. And this was a suggestion by one of the readers, and I kind of feel this way myself sometimes, is in this paper is no exception. In most papers, including this one, there's a lot of bad news. And the reason for that is that it's just the state of our world. We're in a state of chaos and disorder and oppression and slavery. Let's call it what it is, right? Put the euphemisms aside. We're still in a state of slavery. If you consider yourself to be truly free, I hate to tell you, but physically you're not, right? As much as I would like to say that I am free, I know that in the physical world there are some pretty heavy limitations on what I can do. I'm not free to just do whatever I want. Even if I observe the golden rules, I'm still limited, and that tells me that I'm not free. However, we are free elsewhere, right? We may not be completely free in the physical world, but we are free in our minds, and we are free in our spirit. And, for example, when you meditate, no one has control over that realm. That is yours. It's personal, it's unique, it's sacred, it's yours and yours alone. No one can ever take that away from you. Worst case scenario, you're locked up in a box, you're in a jail cell, you're stuck. That will never stop you from closing your eyes and going to a better place. And that's where we truly have not only freedom, but complete, unrestrained liberty. And it's a comforting thought. Lately, I've been working on guided meditations, and I think I'm going to make one on that particular subject of being free internally. Because if you can become free internally and you accept that as being your reality, it grows and it blossoms outward from there, right? And then your entire life and the lives of the people around you will benefit because they'll get a sense of that in the collective unconscious. They'll get a sense of how free you truly are within, and they want that too. Everyone wants that. Everyone wants to have that unrestrained freedom and liberty. Who wouldn't want that? Does anyone out there actually want to be oppressed and told what to do? I think not. We all, for the most part, want to be left alone to live our lives in peace, quiet, love, and community, without these overbearing and overreaching entities, legal entities. And when you start really looking closely, and I try not to do this too much, but when you start looking at the legislation itself, you see who designed it, for what purpose, and it's anything but for the people, right? We, the people, are the ones that get shafted from these policies and these acts and these statutes. They're not there to benefit us in any way. They're there to benefit the government entities, the corporations, and all of their lackeys and lobbyists, right? And the wealthy people of the world, and the bankers, right? I'm not saying anything you didn't already know, but I just wanted to make that point that, freedom in the physical world is a tricky thing to attain, but freedom can be had much more easily elsewhere, such as crossing the veil to the spirit side, or just going inward. If you're not a spiritual type person, type human, if you're not religious, if you're not spiritual, that's okay. It can be done. Meditation and mindfulness can be done from a secular perspective just the same, right? Or what I like to do is when I hear people referring to God, right? This is a whole other topic, maybe for Philosophy Corner one day. Equate that in your mind with nature, right? The creative forces of nature. When you hear people talking about creation, well, translate that in your head to something that makes sense for you. If you're an atheist, if you're secular, again, that's okay. That's your decision. That's your truth, or your belief rather. But don't get offended, right? I was once an atheist myself, and I fell in this trap too, of being offended and upset with other people's views. And now, after so many years of kind of being on the other side, I'm like, how did I ever get to that point? How did I ever come to those conclusions that what other people do or believe affects me negatively somehow? Everyone's free to live their lives the way that they want, free being a relative term, but we are free in our actions. No one can really tell us what to do. They can make strong suggestions, they can make compelling arguments, but no one can really force you to do anything. So that's another area where we have some freedom, right? Freedom in our actions and our conscience. Okay, so I wanted to share, the reason I brought that up is that it's all doom and gloom when you read papers, mostly. Or if you watch mainstream media, state-sponsored media, you're going to see mostly doom and gloom because fear motivates people, right? Fear is what allows them to enact their viewpoints and their agendas. So if you don't allow yourself to be gripped in fear, then they have no power over you. So it starts with turning off the TV. That's a very good first step that you could make. And I actually said that in the paper here somewhere, and I laughed because I say that all the time. Start by turning off your TV. Then turn off your cell phone. Leave them off until you actually need them for real. Not just because you're interested in what's going on in the world from the political side, but that understand that what they're feeding you is mostly poison. That being said, there are some what we call good news tidbits, and I love this. So going back to what I was saying earlier in the conversation, someone in a reader of Druthers actually commented to the publisher, which I guess is Shawn, that there's a lot of doom and gloom, and there is, because there's a lot of, quite honestly, and forgive my French, but fucked up shit happening in the world. And that's why our papers are just laden with these doom and gloom articles. It doesn't take away from the truth. That is the truth of the matter. We can't turn a blind eye to it just because it's coming off negative. It is negative, and we still need to know about it. However, that being said, there are good things happening in the world. And when the pandemic first started, I loved the guy from The Office. I'm not going to think of his name now, but he had this like good news channel. I don't know whatever came of it. Some good news. I can't remember the guy's name, Jim from The Office. I don't remember the actor's name, but he started this good news thing, and some good news. I just love that. I love that idea because it is very easy to fall into the negative side of things and get bummed out and depressed over it. There's good things happening in the world too. Let's not forget, right? And that's what this, in response to the reader who said, try not to do doom and gloom all the time, put in some good stuff too. So they added this, it's still just a small column, right? You can see that, but it is still just one small column on one paper, 1/3 of a page, not even. But hey, it's better than nothing. And there's some pretty cool things in here. I love reading this. I'll generally read either the good news tidbits first to kind of get some positive vibes, and then I'll read the Absurdity Observer just to kind of laugh. Some of it's quite upsetting as well, as we saw last time, but usually I'll read those two to start, and then I'll kind of dig in to the other articles as well. And if there's some that really resonate with me, I'll generally print them off and then share them. Things like this pilot here and his declaration of truth. I haven't read this article yet, but I already know it's going to be a good one. Anything that starts off with declarations of truth, I have a feeling they're on the right path. I don't know for sure because I haven't read it, but then there's a lot of these sort of doom and gloom. So anyway, let's read the good news tidbits and kind of get some warm fuzzies inside. Okay, let's start with good news tidbit number 1. Looking all over the paper and it was on the front. Okay, good news tidbit number 1. The entire Yukon Territory has now been truth-bombed with druthers. A freedom group fundraised to have, this is what I was talking about earlier, I love this. A freedom group fundraised to have a Druthers newspaper arrive to every deliverable address within Druthers neighborhood mail program. That's beautiful. I love that. I love that they started with that too. Here's another one. The Court of Appeal for Saskatchewan has overturned a decision that would have allowed a divorced father to have his teenage daughter vaccinated for COVID-19 against her will. The court said its decision was to save the child's mental health, as forced vaccinations would be traumatic. I mean, there's other reasons, obviously, to side with the daughter and the father, but this is kind of an opposite of the other article that we read last time. That was the mother, being unable to prevent her 2 children from getting vaccinated. The courts ruled against her and ruled with the father that he had the right. How does one parent, if you have shared custody, how does one parent really win if it's 50-50? That doesn't make any sense. It should end with a compromise. And if you're that unreasonable as an ex-couple that you can't come to some sort of compromise for your children's sake and put your ego aside and your differences aside and just do what's best for your kids, that speaks to something else that's deeper and darker, I think. But good for them in Saskatchewan that they're, getting their heads out of their asses and doing what's right for the family and for the kids. So that's really the most important thing. And that's really what the courts should be there to do, is to enforce people's human rights and freedoms. It's unfortunately rare thing to see. Here's another one. In a groundbreaking decision, New York State Supreme Court Judge Gerard Neri held that the COVID-19 vaccine mandate for healthcare workers is now null, void, and of no effect. That's another beautiful thing. Good for him. There's an example of a judge who's doing his job, right? He deemed that the measures that were put in place, these supposed mandates, were BS, and he called them on it, and he ruled, accordingly. So, props to him. Congressman Roy, joined by several of his House colleagues, introduced legislation to prohibit U.S. funding for the World Health Organization. The No Taxpayer Funding for the World Health Organization Act would prohibit the U.S. from providing assessed or voluntary contributions to the WHO. I could make some comments on that, but at least it's kind of going in the right direction, sort of. As Roy explained, funneling millions of taxpayer dollars to the corrupt World Health Organization that serves the Chinese Communist Party, good point, is a slap in the face to hardworking American families struggling under record high inflation, stuff I was saying earlier, and to all those whose lives and livelihoods were ruined, also said that earlier, and destroyed by the COVID pandemic. Response. So, while I applaud their efforts, and that's good that it is moving in the right direction, they're still operating within a very corrupt and unfit system. So I don't think that's a route to salvation, for lack of a better word. All right, we got 3 more to go. Let's finish these off. On January 11th, 2023, Australian medical professionals were given notice in a statement from the Australia Health Practitioner Regulation Agency that the administration of COVID-19 vaccinations is no longer an indemnified action. In previous years, the Australian federal government has announced an indemnity scheme for health professionals administering the COVID-19 vaccine. The notice stated, a person's, see how they use the legal term? A person's voluntary decision about healthcare that is made with knowledge and understanding of the benefits and risks involved. And reputable sources demonstrated that COVID-19 provisionally approved vaccines have real known and unknown harms in immunocompromising effects. Doctors have a duty to warn patients of any material risks associated with the treatment, as well as ensuring their decisions are being made without undue coercion. Seems basic, but gosh, so many thousands of times, maybe even millions of times over the last few years, has this not been adhered to. And doctors were pushing these injections. And now they're going to say, oh, well, there were unknown results from that and unknown complications. And, there was a compromise to your immune system. Like, duh, you guys should have anticipated that from the start and maybe assist your clients and your patients with making proper decisions, Sometimes the most obvious things, right? These are people that were supposedly educated, but we know now that they were basically indoctrinated in their medical profession. And somehow their conscience is clear when they can wash their hands of their oaths and their obligations to primarily their patients and their health. All right, let's finish this off. U.S. Representative Louis Gohmert files a bill, H.R. 9366, to hold pharmaceutical companies liable for injuries caused by publicly mandated vaccines. In the U.S., Canada, and many other developed countries, or nations rather, COVID-19 vaccine makers are shielded from liability. Now you have to ask yourself, how and why would they feel they need to be shielded from liability? Obviously, they have a poor reputation of harming people, and we know that. We know that on the government side, we know that on the corporate side, and we know that certainly on the pharmaceutical side. They've been sued for billions, and yet these are the people that we're going to trust with our lives and experimental medications. Sure. Let's finish it off. So last one. A district judge has vindicated Texas cardiologist. I'm so happy about this one. A district judge has vindicated Texas cardiologist and outspoken COVID vaccine critic Dr. Peter McCullough, dismissing a $1 million lawsuit filed against him by his former employer, Baylor Scott and White Health System. McCullough was sued by the health system for allegedly causing reputational harm with his COVID misinformation. Anybody that uses the word misinformation, especially in that sort of context now, I just immediately call BS. Because misinformation and disinformation, if you're generally pointing the finger at somebody and saying, that's misinformation or that's disinformation, and you're not harboring an environment of discussion, then you, sir or ma'am, are the one that's spewing the misinformation. We can almost be certain of it. Because generally speaking, right, what's the old saying? When you point at somebody, there's 3 other fingers pointing at you. So, and that's the perfect example here. Peter McCullough is a very well-known doctor. I'm not sure if he's a biologist or what his specialty is, but he obviously knows his stuff. I've seen a few of his videos and his interviews, and it boggles my mind how people that have genuine concerns can be ridiculed and made fun of. I know this has been happening for thousands of years now. You know, anyone that proposed not that long ago that the Earth was round was laughed at. It's actually it's all too fitting that it's pretty much exactly this. This is exactly what I'm talking about. The whole orange thing from the last episode, right? You got the orange saying, "They're turning us into juice, man," and the other ones are laughing at him. That's exactly what happens. But then those oranges that are on the floor laughing, right? They're not going to be laughing whenever they get the squeeze, right? And that's usually the way it goes. And boy, I tell you, I was quite insulted and honestly pretty livid when I heard that people were saying, "Oh, well, those of you that knew about all this stuff, the vaccines were bullshit, and the mandates were oppressive, and all, you didn't warn us enough. You didn't give us enough of a warning." It's like, kidding me? We did everything in our power to shake you and wake you up, and you wouldn't do it. You just wanted to stick your head in the sand. And now you're going to blame us for not doing enough to tell you and to warn you? Where were you? Where was your critical thinking? Where were you when you should have been doing research, your own research, to find out what the hell's going on in the world? And should you go along with all these mandates and these lockdowns and these injections and the masks? And why is it our responsibility, because we're intelligent and we're based in factual evidence, why should we go the extra mile to educate you when you won't even educate yourself? You know? Anyway, I want to end it on a high note, on a positive note, because, you know, this episode was really supposed to be about good news tidbits, and we read some pretty, you know, some pretty hopeful articles there. Some of these definitely renew my hope for a better way of life that we all deserve, and really it's overdue. It's highly overdue. But anyway, that is today's episode. There's lots more news in here we could read. If ever I get around to reading the whole thing, I don't know if I'll read every single article. Maybe just the big ones, the more, what I view as the more important ones. This mask one's probably pretty interesting too, the one that's on the cover. Generally, the ones on the front are pretty big stories. So this one's basically saying the masks are bullshit, like we already knew that, right? Those of us that understood how fabric works and the weaving of the fabric, the fibers, and how small a virus is, and right, not to mention that the holes at the top and the anyway, story for another day, topic for another day. But yeah, I wanted to end it on a positive note that there are good things happening in the world, and we have to keep reminding ourselves of that. It's not all bad. It's not all doom and gloom, right? There are good things happening, and you really don't have to look too far to find those good things. You know, sometimes it starts, like I was saying, it starts within, and then it kind of blossoms from there, and it grows, and it grows. These good news tidbits, that's the thing. It's like a seed, and you plant it, you water it, you take care of it, it'll grow into something amazing one day. And if we're all doing that, next thing you know, we're living in a beautiful forest, right? We're living in a food forest, in an eco garden, right? And it's glorious. And that's really what we need to keep our eyes on. Keep our eyes on the prize, which is a better world, right? We're not going back. My wife and I say this to each other all the time. We're not going back to the way things were. We're going forward, right? This is not the Great Reset. This is the Great Awakening. And now that we're all awake, or most of us, some of us are still sleeping or have our heads in the sand, a lot of us have decided, don't like the way that things were, not going back to that system, right? Whenever the pandemic first started, it was like, how do we go back to some type of normal? We don't want to go back to that normal. That wasn't normal. That was messed up. And we don't want to go back to that world. We want to go continue on and and push further into this new world of truth and awakening and love and spirit and community, companionship. Go on and on and on, but I don't need to tell you what the good things are in the world. You know what they are. Let's promote them. Let's promote them together. Let's make these things the norm, the new norm, standard way of life. The default for all of us should be peace, freedom, truth, love, freedom. I couldn't say it better than Druthers. And I'll end there, because that's definitely a positive note.